Hi, it's Will from StormTheCastle.com, and this is part 2 of the How to Sculpt Fantasy Miniatures tutorial. This is a very in-depth tutorial with a lot of installments, and my goal here is not just to show you how I sculpt a fantasy miniature. My goal here is to help you gain the skills and the techniques that will allow you to make your own fantasy miniatures. So let me go over the materials that you need for part 2. You need a sketch pad and a pencil. You need, optionally, some cork or a vise. I have a small vise that can be used. A small vise will work good. Some duct tape is optional. Some wire. You can use house wire, bare house wire. Some children's dough. And a few assorted tools. Some pliers and some cutters and a few little tools for doing a little bit of sculpting. The general process we're going to follow here is, in this whole tutorial as a whole, is we're going to work with our first miniature. Will actually be pretty large. It'll be 6 inches, and that's what we use this for, and that'll teach you the basics of how a miniature is made. We use the children's dough. After that, we're going to move on to a smaller and more detailed miniature, and we're going to use Super Sculpt Firm for that. And by then you'll have gained some skills. And then finally we're going to go to a product called Procreate, which is a professional two-part putty for sculptors, which you can make extraordinarily fine details. So those are the but this tutorial and this installment of the tutorial, we won't be using these. We're just going to be making a large fantasy miniature using children's dough, and that's going to give you some of the skills and help you understand how the process is done. So the first thing you need to do, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to zoom in on my pad here. The first thing you need to do is get out your sketch pad and start doing some drawings. Now I want to point out a few things, because it's there are a few pitfalls, a few tips that I can give you when it comes to sculpting miniatures. Here we go. Now you can sculpt miniatures of any kind, and you're only limited by your imagination. For example, I got a couple of prototype drawings here for miniatures. Look really nice. They're both winged, and the point here I wanted to make is, with wings can be very difficult. So you don't want to start out making any wings, because you need to wireframe that and then use very thin putty to make those. It can be done, and generally you will make those separate from the body. You make the body, then you will attach these later. So that's just some thoughts about the creativity you can use to do anything. The important thing here is to start doing out some sketches of your drawings. Now I wanted to show you another one, and this one is of a female figure, and this one also is quite difficult, in that this extended arm poses a challenge that you have to be careful about. You have to get your wireframe right, and this cloth here, it can also be a challenge, much like the wings. So that also can be, and this pole can also be added later on once you've got most of the actual figure done. So the best thing about fantasy miniatures is action, and we won't be doing action for this tutorial, but I just wanted to show you some action. Do out some sketches and have your action figures. This one poses some significant problems when it comes to making a miniature, because it only has 1 foot on the ground, so you have to be careful with something like this. And getting the physique right so it looks natural is a challenge, and something you should do later on with practice, more drawings and more sculptures. This one too poses a little bit of a problem, although not as bad, because of the space here and the separation of the legs. But this one's not as bad as this one. So there are some pitfalls. You got to be careful of internal spaces. You have to watch any kind of large clothing or anything like that, and you have to watch for unusual shapes that stick out a long ways, because those can easily be broken off. So generally you try to keep it compact for now as you're beginning. You keep your figure very compact and very simple for now as you're starting to learn. A dwarf is a good idea to start out with, because just by its nature it's compact. So if you want to draw your own figures out, you might want to think about doing a dwarf, because they're bulky, they're short, they're very compact, and very doable as far as miniatures goes when you're first starting out. Now, let's get into the drawing. I said you have to do drawing first. You have to do some sketches of your miniature, because you can't just start sculpting it if you don't really know what it looks like. So this is a good way for you to start. Draw our first. This is our first one, our 6-inch one that we're going to do with children's doll. Draw yourself out a box that's 6 inches tall, 2.5 inches wide, and then break it up into 8 pieces, like 8 equal pieces, and those are 3/4 of an inch each, and then draw a line down the middle. Okay? So 6 inches, 2.5, and there's 16 equal boxes there. Now what that gives you is a good template for the human form, and I'll show you. Now you can just do some rough sketching here. The head, a human body is generally 8 heads in height, so the head takes up one layer. The chest will take up 2, the pelvis 1, the large part of the legs, the thighs, will take up 2, and then you have your knees, your calf muscles, and then your ankles. So just draw it just like this. I have these sketches on my website, so you can go there if you want and just print them out, but it's good for you to do it yourself. It'll give you a feeling of how the human shape is formed. So this is the first draft of the actual miniature we're going to make at 6-inch form. So from there, you've got your major circles. Now flesh it out a little bit and try to get a feel for what the character is going to look like. See, I've blended some of the lines. I've started to get some shape in the legs and the knees. I brought his neck out, his chest muscles, his pecs, his arms. See, I've put a sword on him. And so that's done. That's enough. And this is the scale we're going to do now. Eventually we're going to do the same thing in a scale that's this big, which is official miniature scale. So you can see you can't just start out doing something like this. That's much too difficult. That's why we're going to work with the big stuff, and it'll give you a good sense of the whole process. So next, what you do next, now that you've got your drawing, it's pretty simple. There's no big holes. There's no both feet are firmly planted on the ground. There's no unusual arm configurations or anything like that, which makes it very easy to make as far as a first sculpture goes. So now what you do here is you make yourself what's called an armature of that sculpture. And I have made myself one right here. I made this out of metal, out of wire. You can use copper wire, you can use almost any, you can use coat hanger wire if you wanted. But what it is it's a pretty close replica of that character. See, I even put the sword in the back, because you don't have to. The sword can be added on optional afterwards, but I'll put the sword in it. It'll make it a little easier for me to sculpt this. So another thing you want to notice is that I've extended the feet, for the armature further than the feet, and that's because we have to either stick this in cork so we can work on it. See, now I can hold this. Once I stick this in the cork, once I stick that in the cork, I can hold the cork and work on it. But with a big piece like this, with your little tiny pieces, that works out really great. You put those in the cork and you can hold this and sculpt it, and it's really nice. But with a big piece like this, you probably want to use a vise, which is what I'm going to do. You can even fold these over and tape them with duct tape down so you can work on it and build it up. That's the armature. Now we're ready to start applying the dough. See the armature, the legs, the basic frame. You know, the shoulders, the hips, the head, and the legs. That's the basic frame. So now we're going to start